Few rivalries in human history rival the clash between King Richard I of England, better known as Richard the Lionheart, and Sultan Saladin, the unifier of the Muslim world. Their conflict during the Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192, wasn't simply about land. It was a struggle for one of the most sacred cities on earth, Jerusalem. This tale is one of battles, betrayals, strategic brilliance, and even unexpected respect between two men who led armies across the burning landscapes of the Levant. The spark breaking the truce. The Second Crusade had ended decades earlier with a fragile balance of power between the Crusader states and their Muslim neighbors. By the late 12th century, Christians still controlled several territories in the Holy Land, though their grasp was weakening. Peace shattered in 1187 when Renaud of Chatillon, a notoriously reckless Crusader prince, violated the ceasefire by attacking Muslim caravans. His act of aggression infuriated Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, who had spent years uniting Muslim factions under his leadership. Determined to crush the Crusaders once and for all, Saladin lured their armies into a trap near the town of Hattin. The ensuing Battle of Hattin was a disaster for the Christians. Dehydrated and surrounded, they were annihilated. Renaud was executed, and Saladin captured the most treasured Christian relic in the region, a fragment of the True Cross. Soon afterward, Jerusalem itself fell into his hands. The fall of the Holy City reverberated across Europe. Pope Gregory VIII proclaimed a new campaign, the Third Crusade. Kings from across Christendom took up the cross, among them a newly crowned monarch who would soon carve his legend in blood and steel. Richard the Lionheart. Richard enters the stage. Richard inherited the English throne in 1189 after rebelling against his father, Henry II. Fierce, ambitious, and eager for glory, he vowed to reclaim Jerusalem and the captured relics of Christianity. By 1191, Richard set sail for the Holy Land alongside King Philip II of France. Their target was the strategically crucial port city of Acre, also spelled Acre, which the Crusaders had besieged since 1889. But the situation was dire. Christian forces were starving, disease was rampant, and Saladin's cavalry relentlessly harassed them. When Richard and Philip finally arrived, both were gravely ill. Yet even from his sickbed, Richard refused to let Philip claim all the glory. The Siege of Acre, 1991. The siege dragged on for nearly 2 years, with constant assaults, starvation, and shifting tides of momentum. Richard, carried to the front lines on a stretcher, personally fired crossbows at defenders while ordering colossal siege engines, named God's Own Catapult, and the Bad Neighbor, to pound the city walls. By July 1191, the exhausted Muslim garrison surrendered. Richard demanded a steep price: the return of the True Cross, a ransom of 20,000 gold pieces, and the release of Christian captives in exchange for the lives of Acre's Muslim defenders. When negotiations faltered and deadlines passed, Richard unleashed a shocking act of brutality. He marched 2,700 Muslim prisoners up a hill and had them executed in full view of Saladin's camp. Saladin responded in kind, executing his own Christian captives. The rivalry had crossed into blood feud. March to Arsuf. Richard's brilliance tested. With Acre under Crusader control, Richard turned south toward Jaffa, a vital staging ground for any future march on Jerusalem. Saladin shadowed his movements, sending waves of horse archers to harass the slow-moving column. On September 7th, 1191, near the town of Arsuf, Saladin launched a full-scale assault with some 25,000 men. Richard commanded barely half that number. At first, Richard held his troops back, knowing Saladin wanted to provoke them into breaking formation. For hours, the Crusaders endured relentless arrow storms. But when the rearguard of Hospitaller Knights could take no more and charged without orders, Richard quickly adapted. He signaled for a general cavalry assault. The counterattack was devastating. The Crusaders smashed through Saladin's lines, slaughtering his men and sending the Muslim army fleeing. Richard's discipline, patience, and timing had saved the day. Arsuf became one of his greatest victories, and Saladin realized this king was unlike any crusader he had ever faced. A war of attrition. After Arsuf, Richard secured Jaffa and began rebuilding fortresses to support a march on Jerusalem. Saladin, unwilling to risk another pitched battle, shifted strategy. He destroyed towns and supply routes, ensuring Richard would waste time rebuilding and resupplying. Frustration grew among the Crusaders. They had come for battle and glory, not months of labor. Twice Richard advanced toward Jerusalem, once getting within sight of the Holy City, but each time he turned back. He knew that even if he captured Jerusalem, he couldn't hold it without secure supply lines. His soldiers saw caution. They called it cowardice. Meanwhile, Richard's friendship with Saladin's brother Al-Adil deepened. The two leaders exchanged envoys, gifts, and even proposals of interfaith marriage alliances. Though they remained enemies on the battlefield, mutual respect began to bloom. Trouble at home. As Richard wrestled with Saladin in the Levant, news from Europe brought new headaches. His ally-turned-rival Philip of France had returned home and was conspiring with Richard's brother Prince John to seize his lands. Richard's window for victory in the east was closing. Still, his rivalry with Saladin had one final chapter: the Battle for Jaffa, 1192. In July 1192, while Richard was away gathering reinforcements, Saladin struck at Jaffa. His forces stormed the city, driving the remaining Crusader defenders into a citadel. When Richard returned by sea, he found Saladin's banners flying over the walls, but all was not lost. A priest swam out to Richard's ship, reporting that Christian survivors still held out in the fortress. Richard acted instantly. Leaping from his vessel into the surf, crossbow in hand, he led a small force in a daring assault straight into Saladin's camp. His audacity stunned the Muslims. Street fighting raged, and soon Richard's banner flew once again over Jaffa. Days later, on August 4th, Saladin returned with 15,000 men to crush Richard's meager garrison of 2,000. Outnumbered more than 7 to 1, Richard arranged his men into tight defensive lines with alternating waves of crossbowmen. The disciplined volleys cut down Saladin's cavalry again and again. Finally, Richard led a desperate cavalry charge, scattering the exhausted enemy. For the third time, he had turned near certain defeat into triumph. Saladin could hardly believe it. This English king seemed indestructible. A rivalry turns to respect, but victory came at a cost. Richard fell gravely ill after Jaffa, bedridden with fever. Instead of celebrating, Saladin reportedly sent him gifts of fruit, ice, and even a personal physician. Their enmity had transformed into mutual admiration. In September 1192, the two leaders agreed to the Treaty of Jaffa. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control, but Christian pilgrims would be granted safe passage to the city. The Crusaders retained control of coastal strongholds, and a 3-year truce ended the bloodshed. For Richard, the treaty was a bitter compromise, but he had no choice. His kingdom in Europe was slipping away. For Saladin, it was a diplomatic victory, securing Jerusalem while avoiding further costly battles. Legacies of two titans. Richard sailed back to Europe only to face political turmoil and captivity, while Saladin, exhausted from decades of war, died less than a year later. Yet their rivalry left an indelible mark on history. To the west, Richard became the archetypal Crusader knight, brave, bold, and larger than life, though criticized for his ruthlessness and impatience. To the Muslim world, Saladin was a hero, both a brilliant strategist and a model of honor and generosity, even toward his enemies. Their struggle was brutal, bloody, and often tragic, but it also revealed a rare glimpse of respect across cultural and religious divides. Against all odds, two warriors who fought to destroy each other came to recognize in their rival the qualities they most valued in themselves: courage, honor, and leadership. The greatest rivalry. The Third Crusade did not achieve its ultimate aim. Jerusalem remained in Muslim hands, yet it produced a rivalry that captured imaginations for centuries. Richard and Saladin embodied two civilizations locked in conflict but bound together by mutual recognition of greatness. In the end, neither truly triumphed, but their duel became a legend. It showed that even in an age of holy wars, bitter hatred, and unending violence, respect between enemies was possible. Perhaps that is why their story still fascinates us today. It is not merely about conquest, but about two men who, through steel and blood, saw in each other a worthy equal. And that wraps up the incredible story of Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, the fiercest rivals of the Middle Ages. If you enjoyed this dive into history and want to see more epic tales of warriors, kings, and empires, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.